A Friday FBI search of President Biden's Delaware residence led to the discovery of more classified items. And we're getting more information about classified documents found at the Indiana residence of former Vice President Mike Pence. As we learn more about these documents, I'm joined by PBS NewsHour's White House correspondent Laura Barone Lopez to discuss what was found at President Biden's home. Laura, can you break down what we know to date about the documents that have been found in President Biden's possession?
Yeah, Nicole. There have been 5 discoveries so far of documents or items with classification markings that have been found either at President Biden's personal office at Penn Biden Center or his personal residence at his Wilmington, Delaware home. And so it started all the way back in November. November 2nd of 2022 was the first time that classified documents were found at Penn Biden Center by the president's personal attorneys, and they immediately notified National Archives. Now, that wasn't publicly disclosed until more than 2 months later that these classified documents had been found. Then subsequently, on December 20th, additional documents were found, this time in the president's Wilmington residence. Some were found in his garage next to his Corvette. On January 11th, another classified document was found. On January 12th of this year, the DOJ took into its possession an additional about 5 documents that had classification markings. And then finally, on Friday, January 20th, the FBI searched the president's Wilmington residence. Now, this was a voluntary search that was offered up by the president's personal attorney, Bob Bauer. And during that search, FBI investigators found an additional 6 items, what the White House is calling 6 items, because they said that they cannot disclose and that they don't know how many documents within these 6 items were actually classified, but they did have classification markings.
As you mentioned, this latest search was done in coordination between the FBI and Biden's personal attorney. How has the administration responded to this?
We're hearing from both President Biden's personal attorney, Bob Bauer, as well as the White House counsel's office within the White House, the spokesman Ian Sams for that office. And they've both been saying that this was a voluntary search. Yesterday, Ian Sams spoke to press and he said that this was, quote, an unprecedented offer made by the president's personal attorneys for the FBI to go in and do a very exhaustive search of the sitting president's personal home. Unprecedented meaning this has really never been done before. That search lasted nearly 13 hours. They said that they went over every inch of the home to try to figure out any place that the president may have kept any types of documents. And in addition to the 6 items with classification markings, which expand over not just President Biden's time during the vice presidency, but also during his Senate years, the FBI investigators took into their possession personal handwritten notes by President Biden when he was vice president. And the reason that they take into their possession sometimes documents that may not even have classification markings is because that's kind of standard protocol for FBI and DOJ to take into their possession any types of documents that they think fall under this window of when classified documents have been found, just to review everything to see if there's something in there that shouldn't be.
How is the administration framing the allowance, that unprecedented element of allowing the FBI and the DOJ to have access to his personal home? How are they sort of framing that in the grand scheme of the attention not only this is garnered, but also the impetus for it happening?
The White House is really trying to focus on the fact that, yes, there were classified documents found in the president's possession where they should not have been, but they're stressing that since those documents have been found, they have been nothing but cooperative. The president himself has been nothing but cooperative, and that the president has directed, whether it's the White House counsel's office or his private attorneys, to do everything in their power to cooperate with federal authorities and to hand over the documents immediately, even if that means that they aren't providing all of the information to the public, because what the White House has said is we do not know necessarily the number of documents that have been found to date that have classification markings. That's what they've told reporters, because as soon as they have been found, they've immediately been handed over, or as soon as FBI investigators are going through the home, they immediately take them into their possession and are not sharing with the White House what exactly they found or all the details of what they found. So what the White House is really stressing right now is that they have been cooperative from the moment that they realized that there were classified documents in the president's personal possession.
Some of these items are suspected to have predated the president's time as president, including when he was vice president. How common is it for presidents and vice presidents to handle classified information and inadvertently take items home and either misplace them or not bring them back?
It's actually extremely common, much more common than people would think, because presidents and vice presidents are constantly handling classified information. And say if the president says, hey, I want to take this out of the secure room and go look it over more, potentially in the Oval Office, they're allowed to do that. And so I've talked to a number of legal experts. I've talked to national security lawyers as well as former FBI and DOJ officials, and they said, well, it may not be as commonplace for lower level DOJ officials to be able to do that. It's very common for the president of the United States to be able to do that, or the vice president and senior high level officials. And so a lot of them are not surprised that classified documents were found not only in President Biden's possession, but also former President Trump's possession. And they've said that there could very well be classified documents in former President Obama's possession, as well as former President George W. Bush, and even former President Jimmy Carter. And so it's extremely common, and typically they are not prosecuted when these documents are found, because the normal protocol would then be for them to immediately be handed over back to National Archives, back to the DOJ. But the key difference being in the two cases that I just mentioned between President Biden and President Trump is what happened after they were found. And in the case of President Trump, he did not immediately hand them over.
Thank you so much for bringing up the comparisons that a lot of people have been drawing between these two presidents and between President Biden and former President Trump and the discovery of documents. Are the cases related at all in any other ways? And what's the relevance or significance of how these two presidents have handled these situations?
So they're similar in the fact that classified documents were found in the possession of President Biden and former President Trump in places where they were not supposed to be. And so that's where they're similar. And once they were discovered, that is where everything diverges. So in the case of President Biden, his private attorneys discovered them. National Archives did not tell them, hey, you may have some classified documents in your possession. President Biden's personal attorneys discovered them and then immediately handed them over. And from that point forward, as far as we can tell and what has been made public, the president's personal attorneys have been extremely cooperative in trying to help find the documents and then allowing the FBI investigators into President Biden's personal home. Now, in the case of President Trump, he and his team of lawyers had been notified shortly after he left the White House that he probably had a number of classified documents in his possession that were not supposed to be in his possession, that he had taken with him when he left the White House. And for more than a year, his private lawyers, as well as the president himself, refused to return all of those classified documents. And again, there were hundreds in the case of Trump. And as far as we can tell, there's about 20 or maybe more classified documents in the case of President Biden. But for Trump, there was about 300 or so classified documents in his possession. His team repeatedly defied requests from the National Archives, requests from the DOJ for them to return those. And every step was exhausted by National Archives and the DOJ, whether it was emails to President Trump's lawyers, repeated requests for him to turn over those documents, a subpoena, asks to go in and search the Mar-a-Lago residence. And then finally, because of the fact that Trump's team stonewalled National Archives for so long, again, more than a year, the FBI went to a judge and asked for a search warrant. And judges only sign off on search warrants like that when they believe that there could potentially be a crime being committed on that premises. So a federal judge signed off on that search warrant, and that allowed the FBI to go in and seize these documents that Trump and his team had been keeping in their possession for more than a year.
So we've got a clear understanding of the differences between these cases, but it does raise the question of how other political leaders are responding to this. How are Republicans responding to the discovery of documents in President Biden's possession, largely, in comparison to their response to the discovery of documents in President Trump's possession?
Republicans are seizing on this opportunity, which is what they see as a political opportunity in the case of President Biden's classified documents. They have said, House Republicans have said that they are going to launch an investigation, their own investigation, even as the special counsel investigation is going to be running parallel to that at the Justice Department. But House Republicans say they're going to launch their own investigation into President Biden's classified documents. They've requested visitor logs to the Wilmington residence from the White House. The White House has said visitor logs like that don't exist. They typically don't exist for a personal residence for a president. Visitor logs do exist for the White House itself, but not for private residence for any sitting president, even in the past. So they've requested information about the classified documents, and the White House just on Monday responded to Oversight Chairman Jim Comer, who is going to be leading this investigation into President Biden's classified documents. And the White House said, one, we don't have the classified documents in our possession anymore or the details of those classified documents, so we can't share them with you. They also, again, told Comer that they don't have visitor logs for the President Biden's Wilmington house. And they said that they are willing to cooperate with the oversight chairman in, quote, when it comes to, quote, legitimate oversight. Essentially what they're saying is, we will cooperate with you if it's good faith requests, but if it's attempts to try to make this a political probe into the president, then they may not cooperate. And the White House could very well decide to defy subpoenas, which is something that past presidents have done when Congress has requested information of them. And Nicole, you noted that there's a big difference between the way Republicans have responded to President Biden's classified documents versus the way they responded to President Trump's. When everything came out about the hundreds of classified documents that Trump had in his possession, House Republicans essentially dismissed it. They said that they weren't concerned about the fact that these classified documents were found in Trump's possession. They said that they called it a witch hunt. They instead went on the attack against the FBI and against the Justice Department. And now they are also deciding, since they control the House, to launch an investigation into the FBI, all because of the fact that the FBI searched Mar-a-Lago.
Laura, this is ongoing and certainly won't be our last conversation about it. So what will you be paying attention to in terms of what happens next, and what should our viewers be watching for?
So the big thing here is, since President Biden's team, his lawyers, have been cooperating, will there actually be any prosecutions in the case of President Biden's classified documents or former President Trump's? Because typically when you talk to national security lawyers, just mishandling the classified documents typically does not lead to any prosecution. Now, the outstanding questions are, is there going to be a damage assessment into President Biden's classified documents mishandling? That determines whether or not people got a hold of these documents who weren't supposed to, who had access to those documents. We still don't know if there is an ongoing damage assessment, which would be conducted by the Director of National Intelligence. In addition to that, there's these two special counsel investigations under the Justice Department that are ongoing. The special counsel investigation into President Biden's case and the special counsel investigation into former President Trump's case. And the big difference there that I didn't note earlier, Nicole, is that Right now, that special counsel investigation for Biden is simply looking at mishandling, and if anyone, including the president himself, broke the law, or if anyone around him broke the law, and just the mishandling of those documents. In the case of the special counsel's investigation into President Trump, they are potentially looking into much more grievous criminal charges against the former president, because they are specifically looking at whether or not former President Trump obstructed the DOJ, the National Archives, and their ability to regain those documents. They're also looking at whether or not President Trump violated the Espionage Act. So those are very different potential charges that could be brought against former President Trump.
Laura Burrell Lopez, PBS NewsHour's White House correspondent, thank you for your insights and for joining me.
Thank you.
For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Nicole Ellis.